This is Roxanne Seitz with Community Television, and my guest today is Mikki Baloy, a shaman. And I'm here to hear about Mikki's shamanic voyage. Hi.
Hello.
Mikki. Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
Okay, good. So I want to know about how you got into shamanism, what shamanism is. So tell me something.
Goodness, yeah, and we only have half an hour.
That's right.
In every indigenous culture, and all of us have indigenous roots, even if we're not what we would call First Nations people now. In every indigenous culture, there was a shaman who was sort of the spiritual center of the community. And the shaman would lead ceremony and ritual for the people and sort of attend to the spiritual needs. The shaman was also often a healer, whether through energy work or through herbs. And despite conquest and witch hunts and forced conversions and so forth, a lot of the shamanic traditions have survived and are still practiced. And so a lot of us have this beautiful opportunity now, if we feel called to do it, to tap into those traditions. The traditions that I know best at this point are from the Q'ero Indians in Peru, up in the high Andes Mountains. They're the descendants of the Inca. So this here is my my mesa, which is sort of a medicine bundle or a traveling altar. And
I saw that before when you came to Gilda's Club.
Yeah.
Right,
so
right.
when I volunteered there, I used my mesa for everyone to see.
So everything in the mesa has some sacred purpose to it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So there are tools in there that I use in ceremony and in healing sessions. And also just some objects for me. They're sort of touchstones to remind me of the sacred and of my own teachers and my own lineage. So I've studied with the Q'ero, and I've studied that lineage, but I've also studied some Native American tradition, some Central American, and some Celtic.
Did you go to the locations where those people lived?
I went to Peru. I was there for a few weeks a couple of years ago. Otherwise, no. I'm very fortunate. I think it's one of the beautiful gifts of living in this particular sort of 21st century, very connected culture, that I have access to teachers from New York. So,
okay. So quality has come to New York.
Exactly, yes. Although, of course, I would love to go to Ireland and all of the countries of my own ancestors. Yeah.
So you were saying that we all have indigenous roots, and we all come from shamanic traditions.
Absolutely.
So you were saying, my understanding is that the religions and nations that came into power kind of pushed the shamans aside, killed a lot of them, and so forth. So it became something that people had to practice in hiding. Is that correct?
In many places, yes. I mean, we see that with how the American government treated the Native Americans here. Things like Sundance were illegal, until very recently. And, even in more recent history, communism sweeping through Tibet and through Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, a lot of those traditions really had to go underground. But all of us, if we go far enough back, all of us have a shaman somewhere. My own ancestry, again, being Celtic, Nordic, even Filipino. A lot of those traditions are still being practiced, although now it might be called folk medicine or superstition.
Right. Well, how do you feel about the term superstition?
It seems to be a sort of minimizing.
Yes, a big put down.
It's sort of condescending. Some things honestly were based in a misunderstanding of what we would now say is, scientific research. But I think there's usually some seed of wisdom or some reason that these superstitions came about. And I'm curious about that. I love to dive into that and see really where did that gem come from.
Your learning has been a lot more than book learning. It's been experiential.
Yes.
So I'm thinking the word magic. I'm thinking I'm thinking things that a lot of people in our culture would say don't exist. So, how do you deal with, I mean, I think a number of people are coming closer to believing that there's a spiritual life and believing that there are things we don't know and mysteries to be discovered. And yet we live in a culture that sort of says that none of that stuff exists. So how do you live in such a culture as this one?
Well, I want to speak first to the word magic. The only use of that word that I really appreciate or that I participate in is a sense of wonder, like the magic of the unknown. But I don't practice magic in the way that I've heard some practitioners say. I only ever work with permission.
Oh, okay.
So there's no manipulation in that sense, and that like casting spells
Does
way.
that mean that you are a partner with someone? Do you enlist that person's own abilities to heal?
Absolutely, yeah. I can't be a healer if the person is not willing to be healed. It's absolutely their intention and their dedication to their own growth and their own recovery. That's what creates any forward movement at all. I can't do anything without that. So yeah, I only ever work with permission, and I only work with people who are willing to do the work that's needed. Yeah.
Well, speaking for myself, because I know it's taken me quite a while to move from thinking I wanted to heal to allowing myself to heal a lot more than I did in the past. So how do you work with somebody who is kind of ambivalent about healing?
I try to just work within their boundaries. I trust that there's a reason that they called me, that there's a reason that they're coming to my workshop, or that they've decided to participate in whatever it is I'm offering. But I still try to work within their comfort zone and just offer them something accessible. Ultimately, it's none of my business if they decide to follow through or not. It's really up to them and their own timing and their own sense of what's right for them. So I make whatever offering feels comfortable, comforting, and good to them at the time. And for people who are willing to go deeper, because sometimes healing can be very shadowy, difficult work, then I try
Painful
to...
work.
It can be.
Yes.
I try to be as present for them as I can and offer them the tools that they're willing to work with. Yeah.
When you were in Peru, what are some of the teachings that you may have secret teachings that you're not allowed to share, but there may be some steps you went through that you could tell us about.
Well, I can say, first of all, that Peru itself and the land, particularly in the Sacred Valley and in Cusco, the land has such a vibrant personality. It really does feel like the word that they use for Mother Earth is Pachamama.
I've heard the term. Yes.
Yeah, and it really does feel like mama energy. It's beautiful. The landscape is always changing, and it's just an impossibly beautiful place.
So you feel a very powerful energy in the place itself.
Yes.
So it's a very supportive energy for what you wanted to learn.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and my main teacher is a man named Don Francisco, and he has this beautiful, playful energy. And there's a sort of innocence that I've seen among the Karo that I've met. It's not naivete, and it's not ignorance, but it's an innocence.
They've gone back to the garden, sounds like.
Exactly, yeah. And just to be around that, to sort of just be in contact with that level of affection and joy is itself a healing thing, independent of the techniques and the teachings.
I'll advertise my show a little bit for a minute.
Sure.
I think that the healing voyage is really coming back to one's authenticity and coming back to who you really are. And I think you're saying the people you worked with were spontaneous people. They could play. They were happy. And I think that's our healing voyage, to come as close as we can to our authentic selves.
I agree with that. definitely.
Well, the advertisement is, I'm hoping the show helps people find some techniques that help them lead in that direction. So that's the hope.
Beautiful. It's a wonderful hope.
So,
and I think you're right. I think as we heal, and I can speak from my own experience, as we heal, we let go of some fear, inhibition, self-doubt. We learn to trust ourselves more, and we carry ourselves differently in the world. And it makes us much more present to what's here and what's good, and how we can connect with each other in a more authentic way.
how has your study healed you, or how has it brought you into the healing process? If you're willing to speak about that.
That's just so much. There's so much there.
As a for example, then. Skip that and go on to something else.
Well, I'm writing a book, which hopefully will explain some of that in more depth. But, physical ailments have disappeared.
Can you give a little inkling of the process you would take in healing a physical ailment, be it yours or someone else's?
Well, the understanding from this perspective, from the shamanic perspective, is that everything is related. So mind, body, spirit, environment, lifestyle, relationships, that it's all ultimately one thing.
That is basically the mystic perspective, that ultimately everything is one, but on this earth, in our human existence, we see things as separate.
Exactly, and we compartmentalize a lot. So if your elbow hurts, you think it's just your elbow. But my question as a healer would be, why your elbow and not some other part of your body? Why now? What's going on in your life now? When did it start? And I think rather than seeing the body as problematic, I see it as really the best friend that we have. So instead of an adversarial relationship where we're trying to fix things that are broken, I try to see ailments as an expression of something that needs to come across. There's wisdom in the injury. There's wisdom in the illness.
That's been my healing voyage also, to kind of turn off the words and the jangle of words and really start listening to what my body was saying, but not from the exact perspective that you're speaking about. So sorry to interrupt.
No, it's wonderful.
So the body is giving us a message.
Yes, the body is telling you a story. And if you choose not to listen, it will continue to express itself probably louder and louder.
I see.
So I try to tune into what the body is saying, again, whether mine or a client's, and address things on the physical level when possible, to say whether it's a referral to someone who does body work or to do a little energy work to help get things flowing again. But I'll also maybe investigate if there was a trauma or a difficult situation that led to the injury, and maybe that emotional wound is what really needs healing in order for the body to recover.
Is that by a series of questions, or are you able to also sense something?
Both. I do a shamanic journey, so I sit with my drum and I meditate before the session so that I have some sense of how I might steer the conversation and what questions I might ask to find out more. Clients usually know. If they are self-aware at all and they're willing to inquire of their body and sit quietly and really ask what's going on, they usually tell me. I don't need to do too much digging. Yeah.
When you do your journeying before you meet your client, how do you tune into your client?
Again, once they've scheduled a session with me and I know I have their permission, I will sit in the quiet and drum, and my drum is a very sacred helper for me. And I meditate, and I can actually imagine my client being with me in the sacred space that I go to in that meditation. And my guides show me or speak to me and help me to know what to do. So when my client arrives at my office, or if we're having a Skype or a phone session, I already have some idea of the direction we're going to need to go, whether I know all the details or not.
When you are imagining that your client is accompanying you. Do you feel that your client is accompanying you on some level?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
your client may not be conscious of it, but some level of the client is aware?
Yes. Yes, I think so. I think some aspect of their consciousness, once that intention is set for there to be healing, some part of them is already drawing in whatever is going to be helpful to them in their process. So, yeah, so some part of their energy is with me.
So that's very contrary to a lot of the messages we get in this culture, which is that this is me, this is I, that is you. There is a great separation, there's a great difference, and things like telepathy and things like connecting in spirit are a fabrication of one's imagination. So, I mean, that's a tough place to be a shaman in a culture where that seems to be the predominant message. Is an interesting choice. So I guess I'm asking you how you chose this.
Well, I'm not sure I did. I think it's a calling that I've had since I got here on the planet. And I know of shamans who, if they don't honor their calling, if they don't do their work, they actually become very sick. So I think, I don't think it was a choice. I have embraced it, but I don't know that it was a conscious choice.
Well, I was going to ask you if as a child you became aware and perhaps remained aware of things that other people would call fantasy and not real.
I had vivid conversations with trees and things like that as a kid, and it was chalked up to imagination, but, you know, now that I'm older, I wonder what imagination is.
Yes, right.
As a mechanism, as a part of human consciousness, how do we really define imagination? And it's another of those words that has the connotation of being something
like superstition,
not real. So, but I wonder about that. I think there's probably much more to our imaginations than we've been allowed to think.
Well, I will ask you, does everything seem to you to have an animate, does it seem to you, do you feel something of an animate quality in everything there is?
I understand that to be true. I don't walk through my daily life with that, you know, recognition. But the sort of spiritual aspect of shamanism is what's called animism, which is this understanding that everything is imbued with the divine, that everything has its own intelligence. And so sometimes I do make it a practice to say, well, you know, the wood of this chair was a tree. And it was a tree with roots that were down in the earth, and it had leaves, and it enjoyed sun and rain and wind, and someone maybe planted the tree and someone chopped it down. And so looking at this chair, I see it as more than a piece of furniture.
Well, that's a nice way to look at things.
So,
yeah.
But I do believe that there is some intelligence in every plant and every animal. And we are able, if we choose, to cultivate relationships with those other aspects of the natural world.
I was going to ask a question and it went out of my mind.
Well, we're covering a lot of ground here.
No, it's still out of my mind, so jump on in wherever you feel like it.
Well, I will say...
now I know.
Okay.
You were talking about if a person does not follow his or her calling, he or she, whatever gender they choose to be, may get sick. So we're talking about shamanism as a calling. How do you relate shamanism to the arts and to other callings, like being a minister in whatever faith, following the arts, needing to be a writer but pushing that down? Do you see a commonality?
Yes. I think that we're all here to contribute something. I've heard, and I think it's a Native American term called original medicine, that we all have an original medicine that we're here to share with our community. And it may take us a while to discover what that is, but once we find it, we know. We know what it is we're here to do. And so for some people, in my case, I happen to be a shaman, but for other people, it's, allopathic medicine. For other people, it is an art, singing, writing, painting. Some people are called to be just mothers.
And loving, compassionate.
Yeah.
Aye.
So
my brain.
I don't see really any distinction between my calling to do this and someone else's calling to be an educator or a farmer, or there's no hierarchy. There's no one better than the other. The important thing is that we're honoring what's really true and joyful for each of us.
So what happens when we get the message from the culture that we're supposed to go and do this and do that and do that, and we tell ourselves, that we have to push something down? I mean, what happens to a person?
Well, I think we're seeing evidence of that everywhere, of this epidemic of depression and anxiety, so much family dysfunction, so much unhappiness, really. And ultimately that will be expressed through the body, that level of unhappiness. So, and it becomes pathologized, unfortunately. So again, that we think that there's something wrong with
our
us.
elbow. Well, and something's wrong with our elbow, but in or our knee, but actually the knee needs to move and it feels paralyzed, or it's giving some kind of message.
Right. Yeah, it could be any number of expressions of that unhappiness, but I think, our culture does tend to, again, compartmentalize and tell us the trajectory we're supposed to follow. And it can be an uncomfortable and even scary thing to step to the side of that. And I know that for sure.
Okay. How do we begin to step to the side and start listening to our voice? And there's another question in there. Do we each have an inner shaman? Do we have the equivalent of an inner shaman? Do we all have the capability to go much deeper and find a true voice inside of us? And is it crazy, or is it sane?
Wow. I think it's the most sane thing. I would say to start simply. So for someone who feels that itch, that they're ready to do something different, I would say start with a meditation practice, very simple sitting meditation. I say simple, but not easy.
Yeah, got you.
And be in the body more as well. So, I'm also a yoga teacher, and my yoga practice has been one of the most valuable healing tools for me. It gets me out of my head, out of my thinky brain, and into my body where there's tremendous wisdom. So, to sit still, to be with your thoughts and just watch them do what they do, and know that you are more than those thoughts, more than those stories and narratives that you've lived with and carry around and insist upon.
That's right.
And to spend time in the body and let it communicate to you what really makes you joyful, what makes you feel free and liberated and healthy. That's the direction to go.
So, my equivalent journey was to quiet my mind, become very aware of what my body was saying, where things hurt, where it felt like fear, and sit with that for a little while at a time. Not torture myself by doing it all day. I wasn't one of these great meditators, but then I'd come back. When I knew there was a lot of distress, I'd ask myself to sit quietly. And what I understand in my healing journey, besides coming back to the wisdom of the body, that was the time when I stopped always running away from discomfort. And what do you say to finding a way to stay with something rather than all the distractions that we send ourselves through?
It's so important. I was speaking with a healer friend who referred to the healing crisis. which is that moment when things get worse before they get better. And invariably on any journey there's going to be that moment of friction and pain and discomfort and fear.
And may it be a long moment?
It can be, yeah. I think it's important to remember, first of all, that to be in that means that you're doing the work. And so because you're doing the work, you will come out the other side. And it takes tremendous courage to be able to face those shadowy times. But there's a lot of rich ground there. There's a lot of self-awareness to be met. So healing is not for the faint of heart, but I think we're all a little stronger than we think.
I think so.
Yeah.
So how would somebody distinguish between something that's kind of a self-destructive direction and a darkness that is potentially very productive?
I think it has to do somewhat with the stories we're telling ourselves about it. If you're telling the same story over and over and over again, like I went through divorce and I caught myself after a while still, making breakfast in the morning, monologuing. And I got so sick and tired and bored of the same story that I'd been telling myself about my suffering. So I think that can be self-destructive if we're wallowing, and we know the difference. We can tell the difference. But then to just sit with a feeling. I mean, when there's grieving to be done, to allow yourself to grieve. When there's anger
really
to be felt.
direct feeling, not the stuff we keep telling ourselves.
It's the feeling that is true and present in the moment, and to give space to that is an incredibly healing thing just in its own. To cry when you need to cry.
Absolutely.
I own boxing gloves because there are days when I'm angry.
Me too. A pillow is very helpful.
Yes, exactly.
I want to thank you for being on my show. This is Mikki Baloy, shaman. You come out of Central Westchester, right?
My office is in Pleasantville, yes, but I have Skype and phone sessions as well, so people don't need to come to me. We can see each other virtually as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roxanne.
This is Community Television. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.